The trade world of Vanya was alive with noise and color. Its main market stretched beneath a dome of transparent glass that showed the distant stars. Thousands of beings moved through the stalls, each of them bartering, shouting, or carrying goods from across the galaxy. The air smelled of metal, spice, and smoke from food stands. Yet on this day, the crowd's attention was not on trade goods. It was on the central stage, where the auction of rare prisoners was about to begin. The auctioneer, a thin creature with silver skin and 4 arms, raised his voice to calm the crowd. His words rang out through the speakers, translated into many languages. Today you will see the most dangerous prize brought to Vanya in years. A warrior feared across 5 systems. She is not like the others we have sold. She is strength itself, bound and broken, ready for a master bold enough to claim her. At those words, guards marched forward, pulling a tall figure in heavy chains. The crowd leaned closer. Whispers spread like fire. Some stepped back in unease, while others craned their necks to get a better look. The warrior towered over the guards. Her armor was gone, replaced with simple clothing meant only to cover her, but nothing could hide her presence. Her shoulders were broad, her skin a deep gray marked with old scars, and her eyes glowed with cold defiance. Even in chains, she carried herself like a general. Her name, spoken only in hushed tones, was Karsh. The guards forced her to kneel on the stage, but she did not lower her head. Instead, she scanned the faces of the crowd. Every pair of eyes she met quickly turned away. The auctioneer smiled with sharp teeth. Yes, she is fierce. But think of what she can bring to your house, your army, your cause. She has defeated entire squads alone. None could stand against her, until betrayal led to her capture. Who among you is brave enough to own the warrior Karsh? Silence answered. One trader shifted uncomfortably, then another. A group of mercenaries muttered to themselves, but none raised a hand. The reputation of Karsh was too heavy. Stories of how she crushed machines with her bare hands, how she broke chains before, how she never bowed. To own her would mean living with the constant fear that one day she would turn. The auctioneer's smile faltered. He tried again. Look at her. Think of the power you could command. She is chained, yes, but with the right master she will obey. Do I hear a bid? 50,000 credits. 40,000. 30. Still, no one moved. The crowd only whispered. Karsh's lips curled in something close to amusement. She watched their hesitation with pride. Even now, after defeat, she was too much for them. She thought perhaps no one would dare take her, and for the first time since her capture, that thought gave her a strange sense of victory. Then, from the very edge of the crowd, a single hand rose. It was not a wealthy trader or a hardened mercenary. It was a human, standing simply, without armor or guards. His name was Tamash. He wore plain clothes, a travel pack on his back, and his face showed no fear. He did not look at her as if she were a monster. He did not whisper or hesitate. He only raised his hand and said, "I'll take her." The crowd burst into laughter. Voices shouted over one another. A human? He is mad. He will not last a day. She will crush him in his sleep. The auctioneer blinked, surprised, then quickly tried to turn the moment into drama. Ah, brave human. Do you know what you are bidding for? This is no servant. She is death walking. Many fear her name. Yet you claim her. Tamash nodded once. His voice was calm. I claim her. The auctioneer, eager to complete the sale before doubt spread further, struck the hammer. Sold. To the human. The chains were released. The guards stepped back carefully, ready to run if Karsh made a move. The sound of metal hitting the stage echoed through the dome. The crowd leaned forward, holding its breath, waiting for the moment when Karsh would rise and strike down the fool who dared to claim her. Karsh stood. She towered above Tamash, her eyes narrow and sharp. For a long moment, she stared at him. Here was a man small compared to her, without wealth, without soldiers, without fear. She could end him in an instant, and the crowd expected her to. Instead, Tamash stepped forward. Slowly, without a weapon, he lifted his hand. His palm was open, offered to her. The market grew silent. The laughter died. All eyes were on the stage. Karsh's breath slowed. Her instincts told her to reject this gesture, to throw him aside, to remain untamed. Yet something in the calmness of his face made her pause. No one had ever stood before her like this, not with chains fallen away, not with eyes steady and without hate. For a long moment, she did not move. Then, slowly, she raised her own hand and placed it in his. The crowd gasped. Some shouted in disbelief. Others turned away, certain that doom would follow. But Karsh did not crush his hand. She allowed the human's touch. And when Tamash began to walk, she walked beside him, not behind, not pulled, but beside. As they left the stage, the auctioneer could only stare. The whispers of the market followed them out into the streets of Vanya. None understood what had just happened. None could explain why the fiercest warrior alive would take the hand of a human and leave with him. Karsh herself did not know the answer. All she knew was that for the first time since her capture, she was not being dragged. She was walking by choice. The streets of Vanya stretched wide under the glow of countless neon lights. Merchants shouted from their stalls, children darted between travelers, and sky shuttles hummed overhead. Yet all of that noise seemed to fade as Tamash and Karsh walked side by side. The market that had mocked them moments earlier now watched in silence. Some pointed. Some whispered. Others simply stared, waiting for the moment Karsh would finally snap and turn on the human who had dared to claim her. Karsh felt the weight of their stares. For most of her life, others had looked at her with fear or with hatred, never with respect. That the crowd believed she would kill this human at any moment only deepened her pride. She did not care about their thoughts, but what puzzled her was the calmness of Tamash himself. He walked without rushing, without showing nerves. His grip on her hand was firm, not weak, not trembling. When they were finally beyond the market gates, Tamash released her hand and adjusted the strap of his travel pack. "We should keep moving," he said. "The city won't stay quiet about this for long." Karsh tilted her head, studying him. His voice carried no command, only simple words. "You speak as if danger is nothing," she replied at last. Her tone was low, almost a growl. Tamash glanced at her, then at the stars visible above the city dome. "Danger is always there," he said. "I don't waste time fearing it." They walked through narrow alleys until they reached the outer district. Here, the bright lights of the market gave way to the dim glow of small lamps and rusting machines. The streets were quieter, but suspicious eyes still followed them. Tamash ignored the looks and led Karsh toward a shuttle station at the edge of the city. At the checkpoint, a guard stopped them. His gaze flicked between Tamash and the towering warrior. "You," the guard said, pointing at Karsh, "she was part of today's auction." She should not be outside without escort. Tomash showed the paper seal that marked him as her legal claimant. She belongs with me now, he said. His voice was steady, though Karsh could feel the guard's unease. The guard frowned, reading the seal twice. Then, reluctantly, he waved them through. Your choice, human, he muttered. But don't say we didn't warn you. As they passed, Karsh leaned closer to Tomash. Her voice was sharp. You call me yours so easily. Do you think I am truly owned? Tomash stopped walking. He turned to face her, his expression calm but serious. No, he said. You're not owned. The seal is only a key that lets us walk through doors without trouble. What you do, and what you are, is yours to decide. For the first time, Karsh did not know how to reply. She expected lies, or commands, or arrogance. Instead, he spoke as if the chains meant nothing. She studied his face, searching for weakness, but all she found was quiet honesty. They boarded a small shuttle and left the dome of the city behind. Through the window, Karsh saw the endless desert stretching far into the horizon. The sky above was dark, filled with stars that shimmered like scattered fire. The ride was long and quiet. Tomash closed his eyes for rest, while Karsh sat motionless, still chained at her wrists though loosely now. She could have broken them if she wished. She wondered why she had not done so yet. Perhaps it was curiosity. Perhaps it was the strange way this human treated her, not with fear, not with scorn, but with something else she had yet to name. When the shuttle finally stopped at a remote outpost, Tomash stood and stretched. He led her out into the open desert air. The wind was dry, carrying grains of sand that shimmered in the starlight. We'll walk from here, he said. Karsh frowned. You lead me into the wastelands. Do you plan to bury me here? Tomash smiled faintly. If I planned that, I wouldn't have paid for you. He started walking, leaving her to follow. Karsh considered staying behind, but her instincts urged her forward. Something about the human's steady steps drew her on. Together they walked into the silence of the desert. Hours passed. The city lights faded into the distance until only stars remained above them. The ground beneath their feet was cracked and dry, broken by sharp stones. The night air grew colder, but Tomash kept his pace. Karsh walked easily, her body built for harsher climates than this. She kept watching him, noticing how he did not complain, how he did not glance back in fear. Finally, Tomash stopped near a cluster of rocks. He set down his pack and began to build a small fire using metal rods and a portable igniter. The orange flame flickered, casting light across the sand. Karsh sat opposite him, her eyes reflecting the fire's glow. You could have left me there, she said at last. Her voice was calm, not a challenge but a question. Why did you not? Tomash looked up from the fire. He thought for a moment before answering. Because no one else would. The words struck her more deeply than she expected. She had been many things in her life, a warrior, a commander, a prisoner. Never had she been chosen for no reason other than that someone decided she should not be left behind. Karsh folded her arms and leaned back against the rocks. You are either very brave, she said, or very foolish. Maybe both, Tomash replied with a small smile. Silence settled between them, but it was not heavy. The desert wind whispered over the rocks, carrying the faint sound of distant creatures. The fire crackled softly. Karsh closed her eyes, not to rest but to listen. For the first time since her capture, she did not feel like prey in a cage. When she opened her eyes again, Tomasz was watching the fire, his face lit by its glow. He looked ordinary, fragile compared to her, yet there was something unshakable in him. She could not understand it, but she felt it clearly. As the night deepened, Karsh spoke again. If I wished, I could end you now. The chains are nothing to me. Tomasz did not flinch. He looked at her and said simply, I know. And if you wanted to, you would have done it already. For a moment, Karsh said nothing. Then, to her own surprise, she laughed softly, a sound she had not made in years. You are not like the others, she said. No, Tomasz answered, and neither are you. The fire burned low, and the stars stretched endlessly above them. In that quiet desert night, Karsh felt the first thread of something she had not expected, trust. She did not understand it, not yet, but she allowed it to remain. For now, it was enough that she walked beside this human, not as property, not as a weapon, but as something different. The desert stretched wide and endless, a sea of cracked stone and drifting sand beneath the light of twin moons. Tomasz and Karsh walked in silence, their footsteps leaving faint marks behind them. The city of Vanya had long vanished from sight, nothing more than a dim glow on the horizon. Out here, the only sounds were the crunch of stone under boots and the low hum of the wind as it slid across the barren land. Karsh moved easily, her long stride steady and sure. Her body was built for endurance, and even with the weight of the loose chains on her wrists, she seemed tireless. Tomasz, though smaller and weaker in comparison, kept pace without complaint. He did not slow, did not ask to rest, and that in itself puzzled Karsh. Many warriors she had marched with in the past would have faltered by now, yet this human pressed forward with quiet determination. As the moons rose higher, Tomasz finally stopped near a ridge of stone that cast a dark shadow across the sand. He set down his pack and began to set up a small shelter. Karsh watched him work, curious at his methodical way of moving. He placed metal rods into the ground, stretched fabric across them, and secured the corners with heavy stones. Soon, a tent stood against the wind. You carry much for one traveler, Karsh said, her voice breaking the silence. Tomasz glanced up at her. I travel prepared, he replied. Out here, the land doesn't forgive mistakes. Karsh tilted her head. And what of me? Do you consider me another mistake you carry? Tomasz paused, meeting her gaze. His expression did not waver. No. You're not a mistake. You're a choice. The words lingered in the air, heavier than the silence that followed. Karsh folded her arms, her eyes narrowing, but she said no more. She lowered herself to the ground near the fire Tomasz started, watching the flames flicker against the cold desert night. For a time, neither spoke. The wind howled beyond the rocks, and the fire crackled softly. Karsh studied the human across from her. He was ordinary in so many ways: no great height, no scars of battle, no weapons at his side other than a small blade. And yet there was something about him that unsettled her, something she could not name. He carried no fear, and that alone was strange. Finally, Karsh broke the silence. Do you know who I am? Truly. Tomasz looked at her, his face calm. I know enough. Her voice hardened. I have killed more than you can count. Armies feared me. Whole fleets spoke my name. And you sit across from me as if I were no more dangerous than the wind outside. Tomasz stirred the fire with a stick, sending sparks into the air. Danger is not all you are, he said quietly. Others only see a weapon. I see more than that. Karsh leaned forward, her eyes sharp. "And what do you see, human?" For a moment, Tomasz said nothing. He looked into the fire, his expression thoughtful. Then he answered simply, "I see someone who has survived when no one else could." Karsh sat back, surprised by the answer. No one had ever spoken of her survival, only of her strength or her violence. She did not reply. Instead, she let the fire's warmth settle around her as the night grew colder. By dawn, the desert sky turned pale gold. Tomasz rose early, packing the tent and supplies with careful hands. Karsh stood silently nearby, her arms crossed. When he finished, he looked at her. "We should move. The sun here burns harshly. Better to walk while it's still cool." They set off again, their shadows stretching long behind them. The day grew hotter as the sun climbed, but Tomasz kept his steady pace. Karsh walked beside him, still trying to understand his purpose. By midday, they reached a canyon where sharp cliffs rose on either side. The path was narrow, with jagged stones scattered across the ground. Karsh's instincts sharpened the moment they stepped inside. She slowed, her eyes scanning the ridges above. Tomasz noticed her change in pace. "What is it?" "Eyes," Karsh said softly. "We are being watched." No sooner had she spoken than a group of bandits appeared on the cliffs. Their weapons gleamed in the sun, crude rifles and blades, but their intent was clear. One shouted down at them, "Hand over the warrior, human. She's worth more than your life." Tomasz did not flinch. He looked up at them, then glanced at Karsh. She stood tall, her chains rattling as she flexed her arms. "You think chains will hold me?" she called back, her voice echoing through the canyon. The bandits hesitated. They had expected fear, not defiance. Yet greed pushed them forward. Half leapt down from the cliffs, rushing toward them. Tomasz reached for the small blade at his belt, but Karsh moved before he could draw it. With speed that shocked the attackers, she swung the length of her chain, striking the nearest bandit across the chest. He flew back against the rocks, groaning. Another lunged at her, but she caught his wrist and twisted, forcing him to drop his weapon before sending him sprawling into the dust. The canyon filled with the clash of bodies and the shouts of anger. Tomasz fought off one attacker with his blade, keeping himself steady, but Karsh was a storm. Even bound, she struck with precision, each movement sharp and controlled. The bandits quickly realized they had made a mistake. Within minutes, the survivors scrambled back up the cliffs, shouting curses as they fled. The canyon grew quiet again, broken only by the heavy breaths of those who remained. Karsh stood tall, her chains smeared with dust, her eyes burning with cold fire. Tomasz lowered his blade, watching her. He expected to see fury or cruelty in her expression, but instead he saw something else: restraint. She had not killed them, though she could have. She had driven them off, nothing more. When the last sound of the fleeing bandits faded, Karsh turned to Tomasz. She expected fear in his eyes. Instead, he simply nodded. "Thank you," he said. The word struck her harder than any blade. No one had ever thanked her after a battle. She had been praised for victories, feared for her strength, but never thanked. For a moment, she did not know how to respond. They left the canyon and continued into the desert. The silence between them was no longer heavy. Karsh walked with her head slightly higher, her thoughts unsettled but alive. For the first time in years, she wondered what her life might mean beyond chains, beyond war. As the sun dipped low and the horizon glowed red, Tomasz looked at her. You are not what they think you are, he said. Karsh met his gaze, her voice low. Then what am I, human? Tamash smiled faintly. That is for you to decide. The desert wind carried his words away, but they stayed with her. And as night fell, Karsh felt a strange spark inside her chest, something she had almost forgotten existed, the possibility of change. The desert night was colder than stone, and the stars stretched wide above like scattered fire. Tamash and Karsh sat near a small campfire on the edge of a canyon. The silence was steady, but there was an edge to it, as if the land itself was waiting. Karsh's sharp eyes scanned the darkness often. Her instincts told her that the bandits from earlier were not the only danger out here. Tamash sat across from her, his hands near the flames. His face was calm, though his clothes were worn from travel. He glanced at her once, then spoke. You saved me today, he said. Karsh tilted her head slightly. I fought because they attacked. Do not mistake it for kindness. Tamash smiled faintly. Kindness comes in many forms. Maybe you don't see it yet. Karsh frowned, unsettled by his words. She was used to others praising her power or fearing her presence. She was not used to someone speaking of kindness. For a long while, she said nothing, and the crackle of fire filled the air. Before dawn, Karsh felt the shift in the wind. She stood quickly, her chains rattling softly. Wake, she said. Tamash opened his eyes, instantly alert. What is it? Her gaze swept across the rocks beyond their camp. Shapes moved in the shadows. Figures crept closer, their outlines clear against the faint glow of the rising moons. Karsh's voice was low and sharp. More hunters. Not bandits this time. These move with training. Within moments, armed men stepped into the open. Their leader, a broad-shouldered mercenary with a scar across his cheek, raised his weapon. Karsh, he said, his voice carrying. You are worth a fortune alive. Step aside, human. We only want her. Tamash rose to his feet. He placed himself in front of Karsh, small in size compared to the towering mercenaries. She walks with me, he said firmly. You'll have to go through both of us. The mercenary laughed. You think your words will stop us? Foolish human. You cannot protect her. She is the one who needs protecting from us. Karsh's chest tightened. In her past, no one had ever stood before her like that, not as a shield. She had always been the one others feared, the one others hid behind. Now this human, fragile in body but steady in will, placed himself between her and danger. The mercenaries raised their weapons. Shots rang out, bursts of energy striking the rocks around them. Tamash dove for cover, drawing his small blade, though it was useless against rifles. Karsh moved faster than the attackers expected. She swung her chain, knocking a mercenary from his feet, then pulled hard, sending his weapon clattering across the sand. Two others rushed forward. Karsh struck one across the jaw with her fist, sending him sprawling. The second aimed his rifle, but Tamash threw a stone, striking the barrel just enough to throw the shot wide. The beam scorched the sand near Karsh's feet. In that instant, she lunged, wrenching the rifle from the man's hands and turning it against him. The battle raged around them. Karsh fought with controlled fury, every strike calculated. Tamash stayed close, moving with quick instincts, distracting enemies when he could. Though he lacked her strength, he never faltered, never turned away. At last, only the leader remained. He held a knife, circling them warily. His eyes flicked from Karsh to Tamash, and then he smirked. You protect him, he said to Karsh, his voice mocking. Strange. I thought you were only a weapon. Do you serve this human now? Karsh stood tall, her eyes burning. I serve no one, she said. Her voice thundered in the canyon. The leader lunged at Tamash. In that instant, Karsh moved without thought. She caught the mercenary's wrist before the blade could strike and twisted hard. The knife clattered to the ground. With one swift motion, she threw him back against the rocks. He fell, groaning, then scrambled to his feet and fled into the night. Silence returned. The only sound was the crackle of fire and the wind sliding across the canyon walls. Tamash breathed heavily, lowering his blade. He looked at Karsh, his eyes steady. You saved me again. Karsh stared at him. Her chest rose and fell with each breath. She felt the weight of what had just happened. She had not fought only for herself. She had chosen to fight for him. She, who had once cared for no one but her own survival, had stepped between death and a human who trusted her without fear. Her voice was low when she spoke. You placed yourself before me. Why? Tamash met her gaze. Because no one else would. And because I don't want to see you chained again. The words struck deeper than any weapon. Karsh turned away, unsettled by the storm of emotions rising inside her. She had been betrayed by her own people, hunted by enemies, feared by strangers. Yet here was someone who did not see her as a monster or a tool. He saw her as something worth protecting. They sat by the fire until the first light of dawn painted the desert in shades of gold. Karsh remained silent, her thoughts a storm. Tamash tended to the fire, his movements calm as always. Finally, Karsh spoke, her voice quieter than before. You risked your life for me. In my world, that is rare. Tamash looked up at her. In my world, that is what you do for those who matter. Karsh studied him for a long moment. Something shifted inside her then. For years she had believed trust was weakness, loyalty a chain. But now, she was beginning to see it differently. Perhaps loyalty was not a chain. Perhaps it was a choice, freely given. As the sun rose higher, they prepared to move on. Karsh tightened the chains around her wrists, though she no longer felt bound by them. They were only metal now, nothing more. What mattered was the path ahead, and the human walking beside her. The desert stretched wide once more, endless and unforgiving. Yet for the first time since her capture, Karsh felt that the journey was not only about survival. It was about something more, something she could not yet name. The desert stretched behind them like an endless memory. Tamash and Karsh moved toward a line of hills that rose from the flat land, their shadows long in the fading light. The air was cooler now, carrying the scent of dust and stone. Each step took them farther from the city, farther from the mercenaries who had hunted them, and deeper into silence. When they reached the base of the hills, Tamash stopped and set down his pack. We'll rest here, he said. He began gathering small stones for a fire, his hands moving with practiced ease. Karsh sat against the rock face, her arms folded across her chest. She watched him, her thoughts heavy. For days she had walked with him, fought beside him, and still he asked for nothing. Most who had known her wanted only her strength, her power in battle, her fury as a weapon. This human was different, and it unsettled her more than any enemy. When the fire finally burned steady, Tamash sat on the opposite side, his face calm in the glow. He ate quietly from a small packet of dried food, then looked across at Karsh. You've been silent, he said softly. Something is on your mind. Karsh's eyes narrowed. I have many things on my mind, human. Do you wish to hear them all? Tomasz shrugged. Only the ones you want to share. The answer caught her off guard. She expected pressure, or questions she did not wish to answer. Instead, he left the choice in her hands. For a long moment she was quiet, staring at the flames. Then, slowly, she began to speak. I was not born into peace, she said. Her voice was low, steady, but edged with memory. My people value only strength. From the time we can walk, we are taught to fight. Weakness is not forgiven. Those who cannot endure are cast aside. Families are broken, children raised not with care but with drills and pain. We are told it is the only way to survive. Tomasz listened, his eyes fixed on her. He did not interrupt. Karsh continued, her tone sharper now. I rose through the ranks because I was stronger than the rest. Every battle proved my worth. Every scar was a mark of honor. I commanded troops, crushed enemies, brought victory after victory. And yet, in the end, it meant nothing. Betrayal came from those closest to me. They sold me to my enemies, bound me in chains, and left me to rot. The auction you saw was not my first. I had been traded before, paraded like a beast. None dared claim me, for they all feared I would kill them. And perhaps I would have. Her fists clenched as she spoke, the chains rattling softly. The firelight flickered against her scarred skin, shadows dancing across her face. Tomasz's voice was gentle when he spoke. You survived all of it? Karsh looked at him sharply. Survival is not honor. It is not glory. It is emptiness. I was ready to die before you claimed me. Death seemed easier than living as a weapon for others. Tomasz shook his head slowly. But you didn't die. You chose to live. That choice means something, even if you don't see it yet. Karsh stared at him, her eyes narrowing again. Why do you speak this way? You are small, fragile, and yet you look at me as if I am not what I am. Do you not fear me? No, Tomasz said simply. The answer hung in the air, clear and steady. Karsh leaned forward, her voice sharper. You should fear me. I could end you here, with chains or without. Others have run from me, armies have fallen before me, and yet you sit across from me with calm eyes. Tomasz met her gaze without flinching. Maybe that's why I'm still here. Because I don't see a monster. I see someone who has been used, betrayed, and left behind. But I also see someone who could be more than all of that. The words struck her harder than any blade. She looked away, her chest tight with emotions she did not want to name. For years, she had carried only anger and survival. Now, this human's voice cut through that armor. Silence settled again, but it was different now. The fire crackled gently, the wind whispered through the rocks, and Karsh sat with her thoughts. Finally, she spoke again, her voice quieter. When I was captured, I thought my story was over. I thought I would die with chains on my wrists. I hated it, but I accepted it. Yet you walked into that market, raised your hand, and claimed me. Why? Tomasz leaned back against the rocks. His eyes reflected the firelight. Because nobody else did. They all looked at you with fear, but I saw someone standing strong even in chains. I don't believe strength is only for war. I believe it can be for something greater. And I didn't want to see that strength wasted. Karsh studied him. There was no lie in his words, no hidden motive. He had spoken with the same calm honesty since the moment they met. It was a truth so simple that it unsettled her more than any trick. She closed her eyes, remembering the endless battles, the betrayals, the weight of chains. For the first time, she felt something shift inside her. Perhaps her life was not only what had been written by her people, her enemies, or her captors. Perhaps it could be something more. When she opened her eyes again, Tomasz was still watching the fire. She spoke quietly. "You are strange, human. No one has ever spoken to me this way." Tomasz smiled faintly. Maybe no one else dared to. The fire burned lower as the night stretched on. Karsh sat back against the rocks, her thoughts heavy but no longer crushing. She did not yet understand what path lay before her, but for the first time in years, she felt it was not only darkness. Tomasz closed his eyes to rest, his breathing steady. Karsh remained awake, watching the horizon. She still did not trust easily, but she felt something she had not felt in a long time: hope. The horizon glowed with the first hints of dawn, pale light stretching across the desert. Tomasz and Karsh had traveled for days, leaving Vanya far behind. The desert was harsh and empty, but the solitude gave Karsh a strange sense of freedom. She walked beside Tomasz, chains loose now, her eyes scanning the shifting sands for any sign of danger. "I think we are safe for a while," Tomasz said, adjusting his pack. "The desert is vast. Few know the paths we take." Karsh did not answer. Her instincts told her otherwise. She had survived betrayals, ambushes, and hunts before. There was always someone watching, waiting for the right moment to strike. Hours passed, and the sun climbed higher. They rested in a small canyon, its walls offering shade from the blazing heat. Tomasz tended to their small fire, while Karsh kept watch. Her eyes never strayed far from the entrance of the canyon. It was then that the first signs appeared. Dust rose on the horizon, small and distant, but unmistakable. Karsh's lips tightened. She did not need Tomasz to ask. She knew instantly that the bandits from before were not alone. "They are coming," she said, her voice low and sharp. Tomasz looked up, noticing the figures moving across the dunes. "How many?" Karsh counted silently. "Too many for a fair fight." "They are trained. Not all are bandits. Some are soldiers." Tomasz stood, scanning the desert. "We can't outrun them. We have to face them." Karsh's eyes narrowed. For the first time, she felt a mixture of excitement and tension. She had fought countless battles before, but this time, the stakes were different. She did not fight for herself. She fought for Tomasz, for the human who had chosen to see her as more than a weapon. The first wave of attackers arrived in the late afternoon, their silhouettes sharp against the sunlit sand. They moved with strategy, dividing into groups, cutting off escape routes. Tomasz positioned himself in front of Karsh, small but determined, his hand steady on his blade. "You stay close," Karsh said, her voice low. "I will protect you." Tomasz nodded. "I trust you." The battle began with a sudden clash. Energy rifles fired from the dunes, and Karsh moved with the precision of a storm. She deflected blasts with her chains, struck down attackers with swift strikes, and forced them back against the rocks. Her strength was unmatched, but she moved with care, ensuring Tomasz was never in harm's way. Tomasz, though not as strong, was quick and clever. He used the terrain to his advantage, rolling behind boulders, distracting enemies, and striking when they were off balance. Together, They formed a strange but effective team, the human small, the alien warrior immense, both moving with determination and trust. As the sun began to dip, the leader of the attackers appeared. A man of great size and skill, he had fought Karsh before and remembered her strength. He raised his weapon and shouted, "Karsh! Surrender, and your human dies." Karsh's fists clenched. Her eyes glowed with anger, but her mind was steady. "I do not surrender," she roared. "You will not touch him." With a fierce roar, she charged, weaving between blaster fire and fallen enemies. Tomash stayed behind her, ready to strike at anyone who approached. The leader lunged, but Karsh intercepted, grabbing his wrist and twisting him to the ground. He struggled, but she held him firmly. "You are too late," she said, her voice cold as steel. "He is not yours to take." The remaining attackers faltered, seeing their leader defeated. Without him, their organization crumbled. Some fled into the desert, others surrendered, but none dared approach again. Karsh released the leader, who scrambled to escape. When the dust settled, the desert was quiet again. Tomash approached her cautiously. "Are you hurt?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. Karsh shook her head. Her chest rose and fell with deep breaths, but she was unharmed. "No. They are gone. For now." Tomash studied her. "You fought not for yourself, but for me." Karsh's eyes softened slightly. "Yes. You trusted me when no one else would. That matters more than my own life now." The wind carried the silence of the desert around them. Karsh sat near the fire, her chains clinking softly as she relaxed. She had faced enemies countless times before, but this was different. She had fought not for glory, not for strength, but for someone who believed in her. Tomash sat beside her. "You are not just a warrior," he said quietly. "You are more than that. You are someone who can choose what your life will be." Karsh stared at him, the weight of his words settling in her chest. She thought of all the battles, the betrayals, the chains, and the loneliness. For the first time, she realized that her strength was not a curse. It was a gift, but the gift mattered only if she chose how to use it. The sun set behind the hills, painting the desert in shades of gold and red. The fire flickered between them, and the wind whispered through the rocks. Karsh and Tomash sat in silence, the bond between them stronger than words could describe. Karsh looked at Tomash, her voice low. "If they return, I will fight again. Not for myself, but for you. No one will take you from me." Tomash smiled faintly. "And I will stand beside you, even if I am small. We are stronger together." The night deepened, but Karsh did not feel fear. She had faced enemies, survived betrayal, and walked through deserts. Yet the presence of this human had changed something inside her. For the first time, she felt a sense of purpose beyond survival. She was not just a weapon. She was a protector, a companion, and perhaps, in time, something more. The stars stretched across the sky, vast and endless, and Karsh allowed herself to feel hope. She had chosen to walk with Tomash, and now she would fight for the life they might build together. The desert was quiet now, the morning sun casting long shadows across the dunes. Tomash and Karsh had walked for days since their battle with the returning mercenaries. The danger had passed, at least for now, and the emptiness of the desert offered a strange kind of peace. Karsh walked beside Tomash, her chains removed entirely. She no longer felt the weight of them, not because the metal was gone, but because her spirit was free. Each step was a reminder that she had chosen this path, that she had chosen to walk beside a human who had never feared her, never judged her, and had trusted her fully. They stopped at a high ridge overlooking a wide valley. Below, a river wound through green fields that seemed impossible after days in the desert. Tomasz set down his pack and gestured toward the water. "We can rest here," he said. "There is fresh water, food, and shade. You will not need to fight today." Karsh knelt near the edge of the ridge, her eyes scanning the valley. It was peaceful, untouched by the chaos of her past life. She felt something unfamiliar, calm. Her thoughts drifted back to the city, to the auctions, the chains, and the countless battles. And then she looked at Tomasz. He was already tending a small fire, his movements steady and unhurried. When he noticed her gaze, he smiled faintly. "Do you feel it too?" he asked. Karsh tilted her head. "The calm? It is strange," she said. "After everything, I am not used to peace." Tomasz nodded. "Peace is earned. You have fought hard for it. And now, you deserve it." For the first time, Karsh felt that her strength could be something more than a weapon. It could be protection, loyalty, and trust. She could choose to use it for life, not just survival. As they descended into the valley, Karsh noticed how different the world looked here. The air smelled fresh, filled with water and growing plants. Birds flew overhead, and distant creatures moved along the riverbank. The life in this valley felt gentle compared to the harshness of the desert and the chaos of cities like Vanya. They reached the river and knelt to drink. Tomasz offered Karsh water first, a small gesture, and she accepted it, her eyes meeting his. In that simple moment, she realized that trust was not just a word, it was an action, repeated and proven over time. When they had rested, Tomasz began gathering wood to build a shelter for the day. Karsh helped, her hands strong and careful. She realized that this was the first time she had worked not to fight, not to survive, but to build something together. As the sun climbed higher, Karsh felt a sense of clarity she had not known in years. Her past had shaped her, but it did not have to define her future. She could choose her own path, and that path now included Tomasz. "Tell me about your life," Tomasz said during a quiet moment. "Not the battles or the chains, but what you want. Who you want to be." Karsh thought for a long moment. She had never considered this before. Her life had always been determined by strength, survival, and the demands of others. Now, for the first time, she could think beyond that. "I want freedom," she said finally. "Freedom to walk where I choose, to fight only when necessary, and to protect those I care about. I do not want to be feared. I want to be trusted." Tomasz smiled. "Then you already are trusted," he said. "By me, and soon, by others who meet you not as a weapon, but as Karsh." Her name, spoken aloud with respect, gave her a strange warmth. It was no longer a mark of fear or power alone. It was hers, fully, for the first time. They spent the day exploring the valley, finding a safe place to rest near the riverbank. Karsh noticed how the animals moved freely, how the water reflected the sky, and how life could exist without constant struggle. She realized that this world, though small and hidden, could be a new beginning. As the sun set, Tomasz and Karsh sat by the fire again. The sky glowed with shades of red and orange, reflecting in the calm water nearby. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying the gentle sounds of the valley. Karsh looked at Tomasz. "You could have left," she said softly. "When I was taken, you could have walked away. Yet you stayed." Tomasz reached for her hand, just as he had on the day of the auction. "I stayed because I believed in you," he said. "Because I knew there was more to your life than chains and battle. And because I wanted to walk beside you." Karsh squeezed his hand lightly. She understood now that her past did not have to control her future. She had the power to choose, and she chose him not because she needed him, but because she wanted to share her life with someone who had trusted her when no one else would. The night grew darker, the stars shining brightly overhead. The desert and the valley behind them were distant memories now. Karsh allowed herself to lean back, relaxing fully for the first time in years. Tomash sat beside her, silent, content to share the quiet. In that moment, Karsh felt complete. She had survived betrayal, chains, and countless battles. She had faced enemies who thought they could control her. And now, she had found someone who saw her as more than a weapon. She had found trust, companionship, and choice. The fire burned low, and the sound of the river carried softly to their ears. Karsh looked up at the stars and whispered, almost to herself, "I am free." Tomash smiled, understanding the depth of her words without needing explanation. Together, they sat in silence, the desert and city far behind, the future stretching wide before them. Karsh had walked through darkness and pain, but now she stepped into the light, not as a prisoner, not as a weapon, but as herself. And as she held Tamash's hand, she knew that whatever challenges awaited them in the galaxy, she would face them with courage, strength, and the choice to walk beside the one who had believed in her. For the first time, Karsh was not just a warrior. She was a companion, a protector, and free to live as she chose. And that freedom was the greatest victory of all.